Quick shout out to the two Uber comrades on Patreon supporting my channel and this content. My partner Rosa, thank you Rosa, and Independent Left News story I just came across that I found pretty interesting, but also pretty sad, was this coal miners in Alabama who are on strike. They're actually entering the 6th month of the strike. This isn't really something I've heard covered much, at least recently, and maybe because the strike has been going on for half a year at this point. But really looking at what these miners are striking for and the working conditions that they are faced with are just really just brutal and disgusting, and just the dangerous nature of the job itself. They should obviously be compensated handsomely as far as wages and benefits and worker protections. It's obviously not happening, hence they are on strike. While the CEO of this mining company makes, millions of dollars a year through exploiting, the labor of the coal miners. So let's check out this article. This is from leftvoice.org. So here we are. We're not giving up. Alabama coal miners enter 6th month of strike. Reflection on the strengths and contradictions of this historic strike by a journalist who covered the struggle from the first night of the picket lines and from a distance. Luigi Morris. This came out on the 10th. So there's some of the workers there. No contract, no coal. United we stand with UMWA workers, United Mine Workers of America. I believe that is what that stands for, right? The S-curved roads were dark, surrounded by nothing but trees and the bright stars. After a turn, we arrived at a clearing where the 4 and 7 mines send their coal. The 2 bulldozers were doing their last rounds of a large pile of coal, while a few yards ahead, 4 workers were holding the picket line. On that night of April 1st, 1,100 miners at Warrior Met Coal Inc. started a historic strike in Brookwood, Alabama. There's some different pictures. United we stand with the UMWA workers, miners. The miners directed us to the entrance of the main mines. When we arrived, workers were setting up tents, unloading firewood, and preparing the fire pits. By the light of a few cell phones, we interviewed Miles, a 3rd-generation miner. When we asked him why he and his union were going on strike, he explained that he was barely able to see his 4-year-old daughter grow up. Working long, grueling hours, including holidays, left the workers with little time for their families. That in a nutshell why most of them were on strike. I mean, look at this. The miners work 6 days a week, 8 to 12-hour shifts with no holidays. Sometimes they're forced to work on their day off for weeks at a time. They risk their lives. They have long commutes, and the forced strike clause forces them. Look, how ridiculous is that? They have to arrive 30 minutes early to ensure they're on time or else risk losing their jobs. How the fuck does that make sense? You have to show up to work before your start time for 30 minutes, or you could lose your job. They're being forced to work sometimes 7 days a week, these very long, grueling shifts, no holidays, just really just disgusting and inhumane conditions these miners are faced with, right? As if all this weren't enough, they have only a 30-minute unpaid lunch break. They're fighting for the right to enjoy life. Again, how are you going to be able to enjoy life or have any type of work-life balance when this is your, day-to-day existence? It's unconscionable. It's disgusting. These conditions are compounded by low wages below the industry average, while CEO Walter Scheller made $4 million in 2019 and has an estimated net worth of $11.5 million. Guaranteed, this piece of shit has enough time to spend with his family. I bet they see him. I bet he has holidays off. I bet he doesn't have to show up 30 minutes early to work or face being fired. It's disgusting. Obviously, he's able to generate this wealth through exploiting these workers, through treating these workers like shit, because that increases the profits for the CEO, the board of directors, the company overall, while the workers, labor away and are exploited, and their, surplus, labor is extracted from them. They're the ones who are generating the wealth, but that wealth is being taken from them. Miles is a third-generation mine worker and one of the 1,100 coal miners who are on strike in Alabama. While the warrior makes $700 a year, workers can't afford a doctor. As he explains, he's barely able to see his 4-year-old daughter grow up.
Right now, I don't know the exact number. Maybe somebody else does, but around 1,100 people are on strike. All we want is what our brothers and sisters in District 20 right over the hill will make it.
So he's just saying he wants what his brothers and sisters over the hill are making.
We want a fair
wage.
They're trying to take money away from
They're trying to take money.
when they've made billions.
Made billions, yep.
The CEO, I don't have the exact numbers. He has a base salary of around $700,000 a year with millions of dollars in bonuses.
And the work that these miners do is inherently way more important than the CEO. You could get rid of the CEO, the coal would still be being taken from these mines because the workers are doing the work. They're doing the dangerous part. They should be compensated as such, and they're not. And they're just treated like shit. We can't go to the dentist
or
the doctor.
As far as like emergency room visit.
Emergency room.
I mean, you're talking about weeks and weeks and weeks of work to pay for that.
Jesus, man. So does
basically insurance.
And obviously, yeah. Speaking to how we also need universal health care in this country, how health care should not be tied to employment, right?
You were saying before that, how many hours you work? I to make it, I average about 155 to 170 hours.
155 to 170 hours a week. So the middle of that would be 80 plus hours a week. 80 plus hours a week. When a normal work week it's only supposed to be 40 hours. These people are working double that and just under these really inhumane and terrible conditions.
Every 2 weeks.
So that means that you don't have so much time spending with your family. I have a
4-year-old.
I have a 4-year-old daughter.
Love of his life.
And, I've been with the company 5 years now. I come off the road and went to work for her here, and I've missed her everything.
Missed her. I mean, I live at the mine. They said.
All we're demanding is what everybody else is getting a share.
Said all that we're demanding is what everybody else is getting a share of. Piece of the pie. We just want our piece.
Yeah. Every day, this is my life. Everybody here has
everybody here has a 6-day work schedule and has to work holiday.
Work schedule and holidays. If you do get them off, you work every holiday and then reschedule that holiday.
You work every holiday, then you have to reschedule. I mean, Jesus, the conditions are just insane. Miners have entered in the 6th month of their strike, making this one of the longest strikes of its size in recent history of U.S. labor movements. Meanwhile, Warrior Met Coal Inc. has lost $7 million during the strike, but it hasn't shown any willingness to negotiate the contract. It's been a tough battle. Solidarity with all of the UMWA miners on strike. Kudos to them for being able to, hold out this long. Hopefully, maybe there's like a strike fund or something that we could donate to. I'm gonna maybe look into that after reading this article to see if I could chip in, a couple bucks. Let's see. What can you push to fight for 6 months? Your body and mind are unwilling to continue. Workers had reached the limit. They had been working for 5 years, and their contract included important concessions from the previous contract. It was signed after Walter Energy declared bankruptcy and was bought by Warrior Met Coal Inc. While we are still dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic and the Delta variant, millions of workers haven't stayed safe at home. They haven't continued to show up to work. They've been exposed to risk and treated as disposable, and companies haven't compensated them for keeping society running. Quite the opposite, indeed. From Hunts Point market workers in Bronx, New York, to Nabisco workers in Chicago and other parts of the country as well who are also on strike. From healthcare workers around the country to Frito-Lay workers in Kansas, they are rejecting new contracts that keep things the same or include cuts. Alabama striking miners, a part of that general sentiment growing across the country. On the 6th day of the strike, the union, United Mine Workers of America, with its president Cecil Roberts attending in person, presented the rank-and-file tentative agreement reached between the union leadership and the company. The contract included a 150 raise for the next 5 years, divided into a 150 raise for the next 5 years, while the CEO makes $700,000 a year base without, the bonuses. But it did not address the workers' central demands. Miner considered a slap in the face, and they overwhelmingly rejected it. Good for them. Many of these workers come from generations of mining families. That video I showed earlier, I believe their name was Miles. They were a third-generation miner. Some are also steelworkers' families, union families. Some have lived in Brookwood or nearby their whole lives, but many others come from other mines that have closed in other states like West Virginia, Georgia, and Kentucky. While most of the miners are white men, there were many black miners, but a handful of women. There's pride in being a miner, in the skill set and the accumulated experience. Many of them would excitedly tell us about what they do at their job, how they reach areas that have never been seen, and connect with things that have been beneath the soil for thousands of years. Alabama coal, it's kind of a cool tattoo. All of them explain that they produce a particular kind of coal, the metallurgical one, also known as coking coal, which is of great importance to the blast furnace process of steelmaking, especially high-grade steel material that can be found in building roads, rail infrastructure, and autos. Many of them talked about the energy conversion questions, and their main concern was whether to trust that the government will guarantee them jobs. It's a fair concern, right? Especially with the history of the U.S. government completely abandoning the, working class since its formation in one way or another. It's a legitimate concern, but obviously, during a transitioning to something like an eco-socialist Green New Deal, these workers would need to be trained and compensated, adequately for sure. That's a fair concern on their part. There are not many job options around, and what is flourishing is minimum wage jobs, which are non-unionized and precarious. While inside the mines, they are exposed to coal dust, silica, dust from the rock, diesel fumes from equipment, hydrogen gas coming from the battery-powered equipment. 3-decade miner, while explaining the reasons for going on strike, told us with tears and eyes that her life is shorter because of working here, but they don't provide health care, knowing all the diseases we can get from working here. The most common ailment is black lung, a term that refers to several lung diseases that affect coal miners. Most mines routinely use painkillers. So just the physical toll that being a miner takes on your body is pretty insane to think about. And these people are literally laboring away, weeks on end straight without getting any type of vacation, not being able to see their families. They're not compensated fairly. They don't have good benefits. They're just, treated as cogs in the machine in order to, generate money for those at the head of the company. But the health issue, and again, this is a problem that's, particular to capitalism, where this company has more than, enough resources and money to give these people a decent standard of living. They're choosing not to because they would rather, or I should say the system is set up to a certain extent that they can only benefit a very small percentage at the top. So we have to get rid of capitalism, so this type of exploitation doesn't exist. It's a structural issue, and this story is just one of many that highlights that. But the health issues are not just long-term. The immediate dangers of ceiling collapse as well as mine explosions. The mine has methane gas, which is tasteless, odorous, and visible. If the air's methane content reaches 5% or more, there's a high risk of there's the dangers that these people face from their health, and the literally ceilings collapsing, the methane gas, all of these things, and they are just treated as disposable under this capitalist system that we live in. One worker told us that 500 feet below, from the 2,000 feet where we work, there's a main gas vein pocket in the top that is where what we call the roof. It can fall in at a given moment. The moment you start seeing a major crack in the top, that is a warning, and parts of the top are just hanging in there, about to fall. Another one added. One of our belt lines is called North A, has already collapsed on itself 3 times from bad roof bolts and rib pain. That whole belt line is in worse condition than the rest of them. Every time I go in there, the conditions get worse and worse. It might happen again, but they will not go back in there and put up new roof bolts and support the top. They have equipment to do it, but they chose only to put up, I mean, Jesus Christ, look at these pictures. Doesn't look very fucking safe to me. Where the fuck you at, OSHA? Many of them had serious injuries. We heard about many cases of workers breaking bones, passing out, losing a finger, bleeding. Many of them went right back to work after leaving emergency room to avoid getting a strike on their attendance record. Again, these people are also forced to show up 30 minutes before they start work, or they could be fired. Workers are trained to respond to some emergencies, but even though there are more than 1,100 workers in the mines, there's no medical staff and no ambulance on call, even though this is one of the more dangerous jobs that you could ever get. All these factors become an explosive cocktail when you consider that mines work long shifts, sometimes weeks without a single day off. The pressure of the strike clause makes workers come to work sick, tired, and sleep deprived. The greed of capitalists to take the last drop of sweat from the workers has no limits. Indeed. 2001, 13 miners died in an explosion. Even though the workers warned their superiors about the safety conditions, no changes were made, and one day a rock fell and set off a methane gas explosion. The workers barely wanted to talk about this. The pain is still present, as is the fear that this could happen again. Memory of the 13 brave coal miners who lost their lives. September 23rd, 2001, number 5 mine, Jim Walter Resource Inc. And there's their names. I mean, you gotta be pretty brave person, right, to get into this line of work. Highly dangerous on many levels. Strikes break with routine, expose contradictions. As a result, many questions come to surface. Workers will lose friends because they become scabs, so they'll find their best friends through fighting and standing together in situations they never imagined. Some families will become divided, while some others come together in picket lines. The status quo is put into question. It's time to choose sides, and whether you like it or not, politics is on the table. Miners felt they were on their own. The mainstream media, they said, didn't care about what happens in small towns, rural areas, and conservative areas of the country. They said the same of politicians. We were staying in West End, Birmingham, close to Bessemer, where we were covering the Union Drive at Amazon. On our way to the mines, we took the AL 216 road, which goes through the small towns between Birmingham and Tuscaloosa. Many of the houses along the road had Confederate or Trump 2020 flags on their front doors. In my experience, these Trump supporters could be divided into 2 groups. A more pragmatic Trump voter, more fervent supporter. His example, the pragmatic Trump supporter, Mexican restaurant owner, explained that he voted for Trump to keep the coal mines open. Without the mining industry, said many towns like this would lose a main source of income. He said he knew how horrible Trump's rhetoric was, especially regarding immigrants, but he didn't want to end up living in a ghost town. Another conversation miner would go further and said, let's keep it real. If the coal mine closes, the opioid crisis consumes the entire families. Many miners' votes could be reduced to whoever supports coal. I could really feel the rejection of Democrats. The sentiment was they don't care about us. They felt disdained by urban progressives. Indeed, Democrats like to make a show of caring about the environment and transition to clean energy, but at the end of the day, it is hypocritical and often just hurts workers, not profits. Again, that's why, transitioning to, a eco-socialist Green New Deal, a economy and society that would be based on, green energy, green development, green electricity, etc. We need to obviously take these workers into consideration, help them transition to new jobs, give them money, give them training, give them educational opportunities, etc. We would be very foolish and just wrong to leave these workers, who, whether it be in coal or natural gas or oil, behind, because they are obviously part of the working class, and their needs need to be addressed as well. Besides this more pragmatic sector, some of the workers are fully into MAGA. They had the shirts, stickers, and 2024 Trump hats. They called COVID-19 the Chinese virus and so on. They obviously need some education around that. They would see us coming with their left voice shirts and knew our politics, yet we were one of the few people showing up in support, making effort to put their words and experience. I appreciate that. And And we would chat as we sat down next to a pit fire in the darkness of a grill under the sun, waiting for a hamburger. While the strike made some conversations more direct and concrete, whereas Trump, why hasn't he even mentioned the strike? Why in Republican state are they totally abandoned? Because that the Democrats and Republicans, both tools of the capitalist class, don't really, aren't capable or willing to really speak out or act for and in the best interest of the working class. That's why we need to get rid of the system itself, where these conditions will continue to be present and get worse, and these contradictions will continue to expand until we are able to transition away from this brutal, disgusting system. Who are the police here to protect? Well, they're there to protect the interest of the capitalist class. The cops are always on the wrong side, I should say, of social movements, obviously. Especially after a judge limited how many workers could be on the picket line, the workers' relationship with the police became more tense, and in recent months, the police have been harassing miners driving the picket lines while looking to the other side, and scabs try to run over miners on Jesus Christ, fucking cops, man. Defund and abolish the police. Give that money to the miners. How about that? That's not an Alabama thing. The police are doing likewise at every strike around the country, keeping the engines clear, allowing business to function with scabs and managers, threatening workers, repressing every attempt at a blockade, and arresting those who defy their bosses. Repression of miners have a very long history. To take just one example, in June 1914, Colorado National Guard joined private guards to attack Tent City, had been set up striking coal miners in Ludlow. As we explained in this article, the official death toll is 21 miners, but historians have established that 55 women and children were also murdered by the National Guard and its accomplices. Police and other forces have never been an ally of the working class. Completely true. Trump, with his right-wing populist rhetoric, appealed to sectors of the working class, but he proposed an agenda that divides workers, pitting them against each other and using more exploited sector as a scapegoat. He did this instead of pinning the responsibility on a capitalist class as getting richer and exploiting workers. The working class movement would be much stronger if it took the demands of black and brown workers and the struggle of immigrants and organized against police brutality. At this point, it's totally clear that Trump defends the millionaires of the coal business, doesn't care about their workers. Democrats are the same, but they're better at pretending. Yep. Democrats' support for the miners has been symbolic or reduced to small solidarity actions that are far from what could be mobilized. So Democrats are good at talking the talk, but either incapable or unwilling to walk the walk, if you will. I once talked with someone wearing an anti-immigrant t-shirt. I'm an immigrant. I have a strong accent. My English is far from perfect. Sometimes need help from my comrades to communicate clearly, but I would sit down anyway and discuss their situation. I've been working weekends and holidays for more than 17 years, working long shifts, earning low wages, suffering bad working conditions, going from one job to the other and getting injured. I went on strike as a casino worker for more than 100 days, so I could relate to their experience in many ways. And I tried to show that they have more in common with an immigrant worker like me than their American bosses. 100% was very helpful. What was very helpful for listening more about their stories, for them to stand. About their stories, and for them to stand. We were on the side of the struggle. At pro-Trump rallies or right-wing protests, the social composition is mixed. Many of them don't belong to the working class, and behind their nationalist rhetoric, they defend their profits of the capital system. Strikes like this, the situation is different. The dispute is clearly with the bosses, and that's an opportunity to fight for unity, to break the division imposed from above. Agreed. Class struggle unions. In an effort to connect struggles, we went back to the picket line with Francis Wallace, an Amazon worker and Black Lives Matter activist. Few workers would stay away from us, but most of them would chat with us about working conditions, the importance of having a union, and what it's like to fight millionaire bosses, or billionaires in the case of Amazon, right? And then they would shout at scabs who are entering the mines. And obviously, yeah, you shouldn't be a scab, but also, I mean, it's the contradiction, right? Those people maybe are in worse off positions, or maybe they don't think they could actually, go on strike, etc. Obviously not, sympathizing, with scabs in general, but I, understand why they might have to do that, right? The Retail, Wholesale, and Department Stores Union, RWDSU, DSU, which is in charge of organizing the Amazon facility in Bessemer, didn't make any effort to mobilize some of the 6,000 workers or its other members to support the miners' picket lines, and neither did the UMWA organize a group of miners to support Amazon workers. That would have been a great way in Alabama to forge those movements together. I think that was a missed opportunity, as this author is pointing out. One or two of the union leaders might have attended others' rallies, but they never made efforts to mobilize the rank and file. Racism and red baiting reared their heads. District 20 President Union Larry Spencer and other union leaders violently kicked out a black DSA member who runs the Dixieland of the Proletariat from a festival to raise strike funds. The violence was also perpetrated with racist slurs, which are caught in camera in this video. Union leadership must exemplify a clear stance against racism and any form of discrimination and fight at every turn, 100%. They just want to make the money the best way that they can, which is extorting people. At the picket line of striking workers in Alabama, we spoke with Francis Wallace, an Amazon worker and activist who was out there in solidarity.
As an Amazon worker, why is it important for you to be here today for the miners' strike?
So we need to stand in solidarity with all marginalized groups, all workers. And so even though we have our own things going on at Amazon, there are other people who are suffering at the hands of these big corporations that we need to represent. So I noticed there were a lot of similarities. A lot of people are noticing how hard they're working, how they're not getting time off, and they're just
shitty they're getting paid.
They're not getting any. They don't get to see their families. They don't have fair wages, and it just sounds a lot like the union. And so I feel like we really need to be out here and represent for these people because they're going through the same things that we're going through at Bessemer. And
It's at Amazon.
All the support with everybody, we won't get as far as we could. And so it's good for us to band together and all show support to each other because of strength in numbers. They have been showing how much we actually need a union back in Bessemer. And these people are showing how bad it was before they had unions in these certain situations and why they're choosing to have unions represent them after having experienced both. And the fact that they prefer the union just kind of solidifies it a lot.
And it was hard to get the news out about the miners. I mean, starting now, what do you think people, outside of...
So this was back in April, basically at the start of the strike.
I feel like they should know that they're being worked like dogs. They're over 2,000 feet underground, and it's
very dangerous. Yeah.
And so the fact that they're not getting fair treatment when they're risking their lives 6-7 days a week is extremely unfair.
Yeah.
And they should get way more.
100%.
Benefits, way more pay for everything that they.
100%. Our community supports Amazon workers on strike, no contract coal. In a similar situation, another union rep tried to kick us out of a picket line while waving his hands across his neck. He shouted, "Socialism's not what." We refused to leave and stayed with the workers. Once he left, the workers came us to say they appreciate us being there, that they valued our efforts to put out their stories. They made clear that we were welcome. Sometimes union leaders will use certain prejudices in their favor, but that doesn't mean they represent what workers want. If we had called the workers and asked them if it was okay for us to be there, they would have said yes. How just often, this union leadership kind of disconnected from, the actual union, rank and file membership. And we see that time and time again, whether it's the miners union or the auto union or what have you. During some of our first interviews with the workers, they were asked to redirect press to the union reps or just answer unfair labor practices. But to get solidarity and support, workers must speak freely about the experience and what they're fighting for. 100%. We need to hear it from them, the workers' mouths themselves. Generally, the strike lacked democratic spaces where workers could gather to talk, make proposals, and vote how to organize their struggle every week. Each time the workers tried to defy the judge's limit and how many of them could be at a picket line, the union leaders were urging them to disperse. So obviously not the union leadership here, like many other unions in the U.S., not very militant, right? Same went for blocking the scabs. The goal of a picket line is to create a strong line of workers who won't allow scabs and managers to enter the mine. This was also immediately discouraged by the union. This needs to be changed. Agreed. been 6 months of striking. The miners have been dealing with isolation. The struggle ignored by politicians and mainstream media. The court's limit of 6 workers on a picket line has now been extended to just 10. So the courts, the cops, union leadership, higher ups at the mines, all against, the workers in their battle for just being treated with basic dignity and respect and, worker protections, etc. Meanwhile, police officers are harassing them, and the National Labor Relations Board section has denied that scabs are crossing picket lines with their cars, injuring miners, despite the evidence. Strikes like this have a huge impact. Looks like you should have spaced that there. Not only for the miners, but also for the rest of the working class in the U.S. In that sense, it's vital that we workers take full agency of our struggle and discuss every step and demand, along with other union leaders who have been showing up in support. We have to take bold action to pressure the bosses and politicians who have been complicit in isolating the miner strikes. They're at a point where all solidarity is needed to win this fight. What needs to be encouraged is self-organization of the working class beyond individuals. The main organ of democracy should be assemblies or mass meetings of workers with decision-making powers. Workers should have the right, especially during strikes, to meet at least every week to discuss steps forward. Strikes open space to democratize and improve our unions, to make them more democratic, to orient them towards class struggle. Last part, super important. Example of how things can change in the Women's Auxiliary Committee, formed by some of the miners' wives and daughters. The role of the families in the strike stands out from the beginning. In early interviews with one of the miners' wives, she told us there was a huge struggle in 1989 known as the Pits and Coal Strike that lasted more than 10 months, and thousands of workers were arrested during it. In this fight, the Daughters of Mother Jones group was formed as a group of women who helped organize picket lines, helped workers and ran communities. So after that, UMW formed a women's auxiliary. We're working on trying to get that reestablished, auxiliary for the strike in the union. Women's Auxiliary Committee has been vital, not only in collecting contributions, but also in breaking the isolation the strike has suffered since the beginning. On July 28th, the delegation of warrior miners traveled to New York City. I remember this. Traveled to New York to protest in front of BlackRock office. Had the chance to talk again with many miners we met while in Alabama. The willingness to fight is expressed in John's words in this interview. We are not giving up. Let's take a listen.
Josh Krim.
I come down here to support my brothers and sisters in the mines. Tuscaloosa, Alabama. Yes. A little over 4 months. Yes. I think it's amazing that these folks stop their lives, come out here and support us from a little small town in Brookwood, Alabama.
Dusty, really dusty.
I mean, we go down there. Most days we're down there at least minimum
12 hours minimum. No light. So working in the darkness.
It's extremely dusty.
Yeah, that's a black lung, right?
It's different.
Time off, yeah. Like what the other person said.
Literally, from the time I hired in, I've had like 2 days.
How long do you work there?
That was it.
That would be what I asked now.
Especially being new, we're on, I think it's like an 800-hour probationary period.
800-hour probation
You get a day off. Especially like me, like I only get to see my son every other weekend.
He only gets to see his kid every other. I mean, what kind of life is that? That isn't a life.
I lose that. I literally didn't see my kid for 2 months.
Didn't see his child for 2 months, man.
That's rough.
Fuck yeah, it is. It's disgusting.
They need to step up. While we're sitting here trying to get a contract, these
CEOs
these big people that are running this Warrior Met company, they're out at the beach
kicking back, yeah.
They're not even taking this serious.
They're living the good life while these people are, struggling, literally dying.
We're paying for their beach trips, paid for them.
Said they're paying for their beach trips many times over.
And while we're sitting out here fighting just to try to survive till we can get back to work, they're
Living it up. Yeah.
We're here till it's over.
Here till it's over, and 6 months in at this point, So that was Luigi Morris. Again, this is leftvoice.org. Pretty great site from what I've seen so far. Luigi is a freelance photographer, socialist journalist, and videographer. He's an activist for immigrants' rights. Yeah, but yeah, it seems like they have some pretty decent articles here. I'm going to see if I can find real quick. Let's see. Alabama strike. Alabama coal miners strike fund. I'll link that in the chat. Here we go. I think I found it. Here we go. Perfect. I would encourage you here. Let's share it. Donate a couple bucks, however much you can, to this strike fund for these workers and their families. So the UAW International contributed first 50,000. So you can pay electronically, accepting donate now. You can make checks. These donations will help ensure that we have the ability to last one day longer and ultimately force more met coal to agree to more fair and equitable contract. We'd like to thank those who have donated to help brothers and sisters while they fight for the contract they deserve. So boom, definitely once I sign off, I'm going to make a donation, and if you're able to, that would be awesome as well, just showing some solidarity with those, brothers and sisters, those comrades on strike down in Alabama, which that article by Luigi Morris really documented very vividly the struggles and the hardships that they face through their work. And it got to such a point, they've been on strike for 6 months in order to just try to get just some time off to be able to see their families, and just really disgusting. But again, that's why we need to get rid of the capitalist system itself, or these type of this exploitation is just an inherent part of a capitalist system. That's why we need to get rid of capitalism, transition to socialism, where the material well-being of the majority is the driving force of the society, as opposed to generating profits. So anyways, like the video if you like the video, subscribe for more content, become a patron if you're so inclined. All proud of the people. Peace, much love.